It's funny how sometimes the worst day of your life is actually the setup for the most epic one. I mean, the kind of day that changes absolutely everything you thought you knew about honor and service. I still remember the smell of the ocean that morning, salty, steel cold, kind of unforgiving, on the flight deck of the USS Vindicator. She was America's newest carrier, a billion-dollar fortress, but right then, it felt more like a public execution platform. I was standing rigid, locked at attention, facing Admiral Elias Thorne. And I mean facing him in front of the entire air wing, the crew lined up like a silent, confused audience. Thorne, he was old Navy brass. The kind of guy who thought rules were less about guiding behavior and more about crushing anyone who dared question his authority. And he was putting on a show for the crew, no doubt. His voice usually a clipped. Booming command was low, almost purring. But it carried across the vast deck, every word a deliberate. "Surgical strike. Commander Eris Thorne," he began. And yeah, we had the same last name, which only added this layer of twisted, personal drama because we were cousins, though estranged. The evidence, regrettably, is irrefutable. Unauthorized communication with a third-party intelligence service while operating in the restricted Sea of Japan, sharing classified deployment vectors, endangering this entire battle group and potentially provoking an international incident. He let the charges hang there, heavy, toxic. My record, 15 years of spotless service, 3 combat citations, specialized training in deep-sea warfare. All of it scrolling on a digital display near the command island. A silent, mocking counterpoint to his words. I just stood there, my dark hair pulled back so tight it felt like it was lifting my cheekbones, posture perfect, saying nothing. What could I say? Any defense would have just been swallowed by the wind and his narrative. My second-in-command, Lieutenant Commander Sam Rourke, was standing a bit apart, his face white, his loyalty visibly tearing him apart. He tried to step forward, just a twitch, really, but a senior officer behind him silenced him with that slow, deliberate shake of the head, that don't you dare look that freezes you in your boots. Your actions. "Commander," Thorne continued, pacing slowly, like a predator circling its prey, "represent a fundamental, intolerable breach of trust. A betrayal." I finally spoke, my voice steady, betraying none of the absolute inferno of shock and anger raging inside me. "Admiral, with respect, I request permission to review the evidence against me, sir." His response was immediate, chilling. "Denied. The material remains classified above your current clearance." It was that denial that felt like the real blow, the procedural irregularity so blatant it made the gulls circling overhead sound like angry shrieks. Denying an accused officer the evidence? That wasn't the Navy I knew. That was a kangaroo court. "Commander Eris Thorne, you are hereby relieved of duty. You will be transported off this vessel immediately, confined pending formal court-martial proceedings." And then came the move that was pure theater, pure malice. Admiral Thorne reached out, not letting a master-at-arms do the job, and personally ripped the insignia of rank from my uniform. It was a deliberately humiliating gesture, one you almost never saw outside of old black-and-white war movies. He held the gold eagles in his palm for a long moment, watching my face for a reaction I refused to give, before pocketing them. "Leave my ship," he ordered, his voice suddenly sharp, cold, final. I executed a perfect salute, snappy, held it one beat longer than necessary, just a subtle message to the few who still understood. Then I turned and started that long, lonely walk across the massive deck toward the waiting helicopter. As I walked, I saw the silent protest, the true heart of the crew. One by one, starting with a young ensign barely visible in a hatchway, sailors began rendering slow, perfect salutes. Not all, but enough to be noticed. Each one was a small act of defiance, a quiet vote of confidence, and I felt that more than the sting of the Admiral's betrayal. I didn't look back. I just walked, my stride unfaltering, the helicopter rotors starting to beat the air into a violent, churning current around me. 6 hours. That's all the time I was gone. I was sitting in some sterile, cinderblock room at Naval Base Coronado, waiting for the administrative paperwork to start the slow, agonizing process of crushing my career when the alarms began blaring back on the Vindicator. Rourke, bless his persistent, engineering-focused soul, had immediately gone digging. He knew my work, he knew me. He found anomalies in the quantum encryption logs, power usage spikes that indicated communications data was being inserted after the fact, not generated organically. He was on his personal secure tablet, looking at communications logs for Project Chimera, our deepest, most classified program, when Captain Marcus Doyle, the Vindicator's CO, walked in. "You're digging?" "Lieutenant Commander," Doyle stated. His face grim, but his eyes held a flicker of doubt. "Sir, the evidence is garbage. Eris would never route through those compromised regional servers. It's either incredibly sloppy tradecraft, or it's fabricated," Rourke insisted. "I know," Doyle replied quietly, leaning in. "But Thorne has friends, Rourke." This came from high above him. "I can't protect you. Just delete your search history and focus on the carrier." But then the call came. General Quarters, not a drill. In the Combat Direction Center, CDC, they were staring at a radar display showing an unexpected contact, a nuclear submarine surfacing just off the starboard bow, 15 miles out. It wasn't Russian, not Chinese. Passive sonar suggested an American prop design, but with modifications they couldn't identify. Thorne was apoplectic. "We have no submarines in this region. Identify yourselves. You are in restricted waters." Silence. Just the low thrumming of a massive vessel sitting dead in the water. Then the secure burst transmission hit. Text only, stark white against black on the main tactical display, awaiting orders from Commander Thorne. The CDC went dead silent. Every eye turned to Admiral Thorne. His face was a mask of controlled fury, but underneath you could see the sweat. "Respond immediately. Identify yourself and state your mission," Thorne barked. Another silent minute stretched agonizingly. Then the screen flickered again. A new message: USS Shadow, Deep Recon Division, will communicate only with Commander Eris Thorne. Captain Doyle turned to the Admiral. "Sir, there is no USS Shadow in the Naval Registry." "Because it doesn't exist!" Thorne snapped, teeth clenched. He immediately went to the tactical officer. "Weapon status. That vessel is refusing direct orders." Rourke, running from the engineering deck, burst into the CDC. "Sir, with respect, I served 2 years under Commander Eris Thorne during the Chimera trials. That matches the profile of a specialized, deeply modified vessel. The propulsion is unique." Thorne cut him off with a chilling gaze. "You are not a submarine expert, Lieutenant Commander." "I know the Shadow, sir. Eris was its operational designer and first test pilot." "If that's the Shadow out there," Rourke pleaded, taking a breath and saying the words no one dared utter, "it will only respond to Commander Eris Thorne. That's the failsafe. It's hard-keyed to her command codes against capture or compromise." The tension in that room was thick enough to choke on. The morning's humiliation suddenly connected to the afternoon's crisis. Meanwhile, I was still sitting in my little room, drinking awful lukewarm coffee when the door opened. And it wasn't some master-at-arms. It was the CNO, Admiral James Vance himself, flanked by the Director of Naval Intelligence, DNI Eleanor Rhodes. This wasn't just a simple disciplinary matter anymore. They didn't waste time on pleasantries. "Eris," Vance said, bypassing all protocol, "what the hell is the Shadow doing 15 miles off the Vindicator's bow?" I explained the Chimera protocols, how the deep-water stealth submarine was designed to operate entirely outside the conventional chain of command. A last-resort vessel only responsive to its architect. Me, because after the scandals of the 90s, Naval Intelligence wanted a program that could function even if the entire command structure was compromised. And it intercepted communications about my removal, I finished, my voice calm, professional. Its protocol required verification of the command change through me. That's why it surfaced. The DNI nodded, a grim, weary expression on her face. The Shadow was tracking a new, sophisticated deep-water surveillance network being deployed by a foreign power. It just intercepted critical intel on the network's specifications. If we don't pull that data and run analysis, it will be automatically transmitted to Strategic Command in less than 24 hours. She looked me dead in the eye. Eris Project Chimera was never just a submarine program. It was a counterintelligence operation designed to smoke out a leak at the highest levels of Navy command. I already knew. I'd lived with the lie for 6 months. Your supposed unauthorized communications were sanctioned disinformation, the DNI stated, pulling up a display on a secured tablet that showed logs approved by the CNO himself, hidden from the regular chain of command. We fabricated a controlled narrative. Only 5 people knew the truth. You volunteered to be the apparent security risk. Admiral Vance stepped in. We had evidence someone was passing deployment information. We needed the mold to believe they had successfully removed the officer tracking their new intelligence asset. My cousin, Admiral Elias Thorne, had taken the bait. He wasn't the traitor, he was the weapon. The DNI slid a file across the table. 4 hours after you were relieved, a foreign intelligence officer received confirmation that the target had been neutralized. The information Thorne received about your communications was planted, and the pathway it took to reach him exposed. The actual security breach, Captain Felix Mercer, Thorne's former classmate and head of the Joint Planning Staff. Mercer was arrested 3 hours ago. The realization hit me harder than any of Thorne's cruel words. Thorne had been an unwitting tool, used against his own blood, against his own officer. He'd humiliated me, but he'd done it believing he was protecting the fleet. That was the central tragedy of the whole thing. Aris, we need you to go back, resume command, override the automated protocols, and secure that intelligence, Vance commanded. The sun was just breaking over the horizon, turning the sea into this impossible shade of rose gold, when the helicopter landed back on the Vindicator. I stepped out, my posture the same, but the weight on my shoulders gone. Admiral Thorne, Captain Doyle, and Rourke were waiting. Thorne's jaw was tight, his face pale, showing the full, dawning horror of what he had done. The CNO and DNI followed me out. No one spoke a word until we were all assembled in the secure briefing room, the sun streaming through the porthole windows. I was wrong, Thorne finally managed, his voice barely a whisper, eyes fixed on me. I did my duty as I understood it, Aris, but I was wrong. I apologize for the public humiliation. I never took it personally, Admiral, I replied simply, my voice ringing with a conviction that felt deeper than my uniform. It was about protecting the operational security of our fleet. Personal feelings don't enter into it. The DNI nodded approvingly. We will present this as a successful counterintelligence operation. Admiral Thorne's actions will be described as part of that operation. His reaction had to be genuine for the plan to succeed. I turned to Thorne, seeing the conflict, the rigid pride of the old guard clashing with the humbling truth. You need to address the crew, Admiral. Tell them the truth, sir. That security protocols worked exactly as designed. An hour later, the entire crew was assembled on the flight deck again, the morning sun casting long, sharp shadows. I stood beside Thorne, my rank insignia now firmly back on my uniform. Thorne stepped forward, his voice carrying the full weight of his authority, yet with a new, quiet sincerity. Yesterday, I relieved Commander Thorne based on intelligence that appeared to show serious security violations. Today, I am reinstating her with full honors and acknowledgement that her actions represent the highest traditions of naval service and sacrifice. He turned to face me directly. And this is the part that will stick with me forever. Commander Thorne willingly accepted damage to her reputation as part of a critical counterintelligence operation. She placed mission above personal interest in ways few officers would accept. Then, in a profound, gut-wrenching reversal of protocol, Admiral Elias Thorne saluted me first. It was a crisp, perfect salute, a public, unambiguous acknowledgement that I had served my country with a greater honor than he had that day. The message rippled through the crew, confusion giving way to a wave of quiet, respectful understanding. As the crew rendered their own salutes, the sea beyond the carrier stirred. And there she was, the USS Shadow, SSN X-1, a sleek, matte black, beautiful killer of a submarine, gliding silently to the surface. It was smaller than a standard attack sub, with a predatory profile that spoke of impossible depths and silent speed. I turned to Rourke, who was standing there, beaming. The Shadow needs a new executive officer, Sam. Someone with experience in both surface and subsurface operations. Report in 2 weeks to Naval Base San Diego. Yes, Commander, he whispered. a huge smile finally breaking through his professionalism. As I climbed into the helicopter, ready to drop down onto my submarine, the final message came from the Shadow's bridge. Command authentication confirmed. Welcome back, Commander. 3 months later, the security breach was contained, the mole sentenced, and the foreign surveillance network neutralized. I was back in San Diego, standing on the dock as the Shadow surfaced, water cascading off her hull. Admiral Thorne was there, not as my commander, but as a colleague. The Secretary of the Navy mentioned a new program, he said, his voice softer now. Project Cerberus, expanding specialized reconnaissance capabilities. 3 more vessels like the Shadow. Joint Command, Admiral, I confirmed. The program needs both operational experience and strategic oversight. Your name was suggested to oversee the strategic dimension. He stopped, genuinely surprised. After what happened? Because of what happened, sir, I corrected gently. You demonstrated exactly what the program needs. Commitment to security protocols, the willingness to make hard decisions based on available intelligence, and the courage to adapt when circumstances change. We stood at the end of the dock, watching my crew, the Shadow Stalkers, form up. He looked at me, the question in his eyes still lingering. How did you do it? Stand there and accept disgrace for something you didn't do? I never took it personally, Admiral. It wasn't about me. It was about maintaining systems that protect something larger than any individual officer. He finally got it. The truth is, that day on the Vindicator, I understood that true leadership sometimes means accepting injustice for a greater purpose. I took the disgrace because, for 15 years, I had always chosen to serve the larger idea of the Navy, not just the men wearing the uniform. Call to action. Look, I want to know what you think. Admiral Thorne was lied to by a colleague and did what he thought was necessary to protect the fleet. Commander Thorne accepted public humiliation to save a critical mission. Who was truly right in that moment? Was Thorne's public apology enough to redeem his actions? Or was the initial betrayal unforgivable? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. And if you've ever had to take the fall for something bigger than yourself, tell me your story. We read every single one. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button, because the next story is about a spy in a tiny HOA who ended up saving an entire community from a shady land grab. You don't want to miss that.